Oh, text line, you mentioned gas prices. Text line starts a hopping. 51400 is our text line. Jim in Westmount writes me this. Gas Buddy says Toronto 136 a liter, Costco in Montreal 156 a liter, 20 cents per liter difference, and one word. Why? That's from Jim in Westmount. And another listener writes me this. Elias, I was in Ottawa last weekend. And here was the price of gas. Ottawa suburb, 135 a liter. Same day in Montreal, gas was 163 a liter. Much more than the usual 10 to 14 cents difference between Quebec and Ontario. We are getting gouged. That's another listener's take. Now, the Quebec government has awarded a $90,000 contract to a professor. Robert Clark is his name. He's a professor at Queen's University in Kingston, also at HEC right here in Montreal. And the money has been given to this professor to try and figure out what is causing the difference in gas prices, retailer margins, and try and come up with solutions to generate more competition when it comes to gas in this province. Dan McTeague is on the line. He's president at Canadians for Affordable Energy. Dan, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, Elias, and for us here in Ontario, happy Family Day.
Oh yeah, you know what it is here. It's get back to work. Get back to work day in Quebec. You're not productive enough. You must work.
Yeah, you get 2 holidays in June. I don't.
But you get one in August, don't you?
August 1st weekend, sort of.
See, you come out ahead. Okay, so Dan, you're also coming out ahead in Ontario in the gas price column. I know everyone can complain about the price, but Quebec, we have a special price to pay here. What do you think about this news, though? The Quebec government, $90,000 to a professor to look into this. Money well spent?
That really depends on the outcome, but I think every once in a while, you do need to review energy prices in general, not just gasoline, not just diesel, not just electricity. I think it's important to have mise au courant, an up-to-date, if you will, in terms of energy prices. I think because it's important for people, especially as they're trying in more difficult times to manage their budgets. Goodness knows we know energy prices right across Canada have had a lot to do with driving up the cost of inflation, and other factors like, for instance, the weakness in the Canadian dollar also play into that. But let me put things in perspective, because at gaswizard.ca, I put up a gas price prediction. Montreal is always about 12 cents a litre more than Toronto. Toronto's at 150.9 today. Yes, you can get it cheaper. I see that you had one texter saying 136. That's actually sold below cost. Whoever is selling that is doing it very deliberately. And I'm seeing some stations here in Montreal, rather than being $1.63, $1.62, are pushing the envelope of $1.69. It comes down to, other than the difference in taxes, which are always there, and they're relatively transparent, it comes down to retail margins. Now, we know in Quebec you have a minimum retail margin of 4 cents a litre, which some of the big box stores try to really shave down to bring in more competitors and to sell more volumes. But you also see in 169, when I'm seeing that price, that's a 15 cent a litre retail margin. You have to have a lot of market power to hold on to that. So I'm not sure if this is going to be answered by the professor, who apparently had a lot to do with previous Competition Act, looking at price fixing many, many years ago. But having been one of the few members of Parliament who's actually, in my time, did a lot of work on the Competition Act, it's very difficult to get a conviction. And the only way you really get that information is when someone actually, squeals, or someone from the inside basically says, hey, guess what? I'm doing a conspiracy with the others, which is exactly what happened in 2006, not to go on too much of a limb here.
No, but I think that's very apropos, because I wanted to bring that up. The 2000s, that's now 20 years ago. It's the last time this professor looked into this Professor Robert Clark. And, the words that came up, collusion and cartels. So 20 years later, you think we'll still find those same words, collusion and cartels?
What you have to be careful here is that, and you go back June 1998, so that's over a quarter century ago, I wrote a report, Liberal Committee on Gasoline Pricing, and we looked at this. And, there have been updates every once in a while. But understand that the wholesale price of gasoline is always pretty much fixed. Montreal, for instance, with the carbon tax, or with the cap and trade, is $1.03, and it's public. That's very transparent. It's the same for Ultramar, for Esso, Shell, and so the incentive to compete isn't necessarily there at the wholesale level. they look at the rack price, the wholesale price, and the New York market. Because whether I'm in Ontario, Quebec, or the Atlantic Canada, what happens in New York really forms the basis and the price that we're going to pay. So out of that $1.03, not to get too complicated, about 11 cents of that is the cap and trade. So it works out to about 92 cents a liter, which is exactly the same rack price or wholesale price we're paying in Toronto. On the markets, though, we know that, if you look at it very carefully, it's about 81 or 82 cents a liter. So right from the get-go, if you happen to be a refiner in Montreal or Toronto or New Brunswick, you're picking up a cool 10 cents a liter because, of course, that's the retail market. That's the rack price. So that's something the professor will look at and say, how come it's 10 cents above the benchmark in the United States? He'll obviously then look and say, well, hang on a second, other refiners in the United States on the East Coast are also charging an 8 to 10 cent refinery margin. So that's the going price. So what is left is it really a combination of gas stations that are colluding? Mm-hmm. My guess is no, because if I look at Montreal, my old site, Gas Buddy, I look there, I see 169 at the top end, and I can see other places which can be as low as $1.55, $1.50. So it's kind of hard to make an argument that there's conspiracy and collusion when you do, in fact, have prices. It just happens to be, where you happen to be in the greater Montreal area.
So with that in mind, is your advice nowadays like, hey, you should actually maybe drive around a bit? Like, obviously, you don't want to drive for 5 minutes, you're wasting gas, but do you actually need to be looking at going to other places for a lower price?
Well, look, if Costco in Laval is charging $1.51.9 and you go to downtown Montreal, say, I don't know, the Esso at Saint-Croix and Chemin de la Côte de Liesse in Saint-Laurent, and it's 169.9, I know where I'd be going. To save 18 cents a liter on 60 liters on my little Ford Escape, you're darn right I'll make the trip because I'll save about $8-10. I'll mind you, it's Monday, you guys are working, but if you're here in Ontario and have that difference, I'd certainly take the day off here to save a few pennies.
Any thoughts on the tax part of this equation? Because a good portion of what we pay is taxes when it comes to gas, and are those taxes fair in 2024?
Well, look, you're in Montreal. The tax you have is right from the get-go. You begin with a 22 cent tax in the area jurisdiction of l'Autorité Régionale de Transport, ARTM. It's 19.2 cents a liter plus 3 cents for your subways, for your transit. So it's net 22.2 cents a liter. Then you have the federal excise tax, which hasn't changed. My God, I was an MP back in those days. Since the 1997, so that's 10 cents a liter. You have, on top of that, as I mentioned, the carbon tax or the cap and trade was about 11 cents a liter. And then you have the TQS, which is, of course, the GST or HST, as we call it in Ontario. That's 14.975 cents a liter. That's 22 cents on the liter, actually 21 cents on the liter of gasoline. So, yes, you must look at taxes. I mean, I did the same thing as well, and there's tax on tax. That 14% is applied to the other tax, certainly the federal HST, or rather the federal 10-cent excise tax. So, yes, we can look at that. But I think what the good professor will likely do is take a holistic approach, break it all down, show people what the number is, which you and I are doing right now, and people can judge for themselves whether they're being fleeced or not. My guess is that the ultimate remains, do you want to pay $1.69 or do you want to pay $1.52? And I think when you have that kind of choice, that kind of option, and it's very visible on platforms like Gas Buddy, and you have prediction with my gas site, which is gaswizard.ca, it's kind of hard to make the argument that there's collusion.
On the text line from a listener, and this listener says this is from 30 minutes ago, Valleyfield, which is off island, 144 per liter, Montreal 161. So you see that difference, and I'm sure that those regional public transit taxes play into that. And then another listener says, just came back from Calgary, 116.9 for regular. And I guess on that provincial disparity, why is it so low in Alberta?
Yeah, well, look, listen, that's a one-off and might be actually reserve gasoline. Maybe it's the same thing as, say, Valleyfield de Salaberry, maybe the same thing. I know my family's from there, too. So in Calgary, the average price right now is about $1.29.28. So the 116 is a one-off. And, yeah, you can drive there. It's a little further off the beaten path. Nevertheless, shop around. I mean, it's certainly an opportunity for people to recognize where prices are going, and there are going to be some pretty significant differences. I was in Peterborough, Ontario last night. I bought gasoline there for $1.34. I know that it costs that gas bar $1.40 a liter to buy their fuel. So they're giving fuel away for 6 cents a liter. Where are they getting that loss? How are they making up that loss and honoring my credit card? They're going to their supplier and saying, listen, to compete in this particular market, I need some dealer support. In other words, you're going to use some of those refinery margins that I just mentioned earlier, the 10 cent a liter, and you're going to use that to offset some of the losses I'm incurring in this town of Peterborough, Ontario, because it's it's really a guerre entre les stations-service. It's a price war between gas stations.
Dan, we're going to leave it there. Really interesting information for our listeners this morning. Thanks so much.
Always a pleasure. Have a great day, Les.
You too. Dan McTeague, president of Canadians for Affordable Energy. Website, by the way, gaswizard.ca, so you can find out gas prices for tomorrow today.